Hello and welcome to another episode of Cooking from the Pioneer Pantry. My name is Cory Van Zytveld. In this episode, we will be making corn-filled mock oysters as a continuation of our mock recipe series. 19th century Americans had a hankering after oysters. They were widely available and plentiful throughout the country, even in places as far removed from the ocean as Denver, Colorado. In Denver City, you could find oysters in general stores and also listed on hotel menus. However, if you lived on a farm like this one, and you didn't have easy access to a store to buy them all that frequently, you'd probably only be eating oysters on special occasions or holidays. So what would they have done the rest of the time to satisfy their craving for oysters? Well, they could rely on a crop that most people grew on their farms, and that was corn. To make a corn fritter or a corn oyster that was similar to fried oysters or oyster fritters that people would make at home. For this recipe, we'll need 4 ears of green or sweet corn. You can also use 2 cups of canned corn or frozen corn. Just be sure if you're using canned corn not to use creamed corn, just regular fresh canned corn. And then 2 eggs, 2 cups of flour, a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, and then enough lard or other cooking fat to cook your fritters in. To begin, I'll take my corn and cut it off of the cob. In the 19th century, the reason that people loved oysters so much and that they were so inexpensive was that off the coast of the Atlantic coast of the United States, there were large oyster beds up until about the 20th century. And in the mid-19th century, technology had developed that they were able to trawl or drag large heavy nets along the bottom of the sea floor, allowing them to harvest oysters that they previously couldn't reach. And this allowed them to be a cheap and easy snack or meal for people around the country. And the reason that people were able to get oysters out in Colorado was that technology in canning had developed so they could can oysters, which was something that they previously hadn't been able to do. However, they were also able to freeze them in the winter and ship them out that way. And then finally, they also would put them in barrels of salt water and keep them somewhat fresh by the time they came out to Colorado. I've cut all of the kernels off of my corn cob, and I will add it to my bowl of flour here. And then add the rest of my ingredients. So my 2 eggs, these are farm fresh eggs from yesterday, our chickens here, and then my teaspoon of salt, and my half teaspoon of pepper. And I will mix all of this together. I'm looking at this and it's not very liquidy, it's very dry still. So I'm going to add some water to this. And because what I'm looking for is like a pancake batter consistency, and this definitely is not. So I will just keep adding some water to it until I can get the right consistency. I've added about a cup of water to this, and as you can see, it's a very thick pancake batter consistency, and this will be good for what we're looking for our mock oysters. I have my pan over a low fire. Will be okay for cooking. You can also just use the coals, but since it's not burning a lot, I'll just use the low fire. Put my lard in there. let it melt. And once it's melted completely, I will put start baking my cooking my fritters. My lard is all melted, so I will put a spoonful of the batter into it to cook it. And it's really hot, so it won't take very long to cook, maybe a minute or two, and then I'll flip it over and cook it until it's golden brown on both sides. I'll give our mock oysters or corn fritters a try. And having never had real oyster fritters before, I'm not sure how they compare taste-wise. I would imagine texture, they're similar in that you get the crunchiness of the corn and then the softness of the fritter around it. Whereas like kind of have that firmness in an oyster. And then taste, probably not as salty as an oyster, but I guess with my imagination, I could imagine that I'm eating an oyster fritter. Still very good. I enjoy eating these. You can eat them with maple syrup or ketchup. I personally just like eating mine plain. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Cooking from the Pioneer Pantry, where we made mock oysters or corn fritters. If you would like the recipe, please visit our website, the City of Littleton website, on the Littleton Museum page under the Museum at Home tab. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.